Timmy Mack, how are you today?
I'm doing good, Mike. So I don't know if you can hear it, but I'm standing about 300 yards away from the practice facility right now, and the Eagles have this simulated fan noise going through their speakers, clearly turned all the way up because I've never heard it from this distance before. So obviously, they're simulating the crowd noise that they're expecting at the in New Orleans.
Yeah, he alluded to that in his press conference today. What's the state of the team right now? And they're going to probably be without a couple. I don't know if CJ Gardner-Johnson's going to play. I don't know if A.J. Brown's going to play. What's the latest on that, and how are they set for this game?
Well, it's not looking good for either of those players. We were just out on the practice field a few minutes ago, and no A.J. Brown, no C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Normally, on Friday, a player isn't on the practice field. That suggests that they're not going to be available for the game. And that's just kind of, Brown even said that to Lisa Salters on the Monday Night Football broadcast, that he expects to be out a couple weeks, sort of checking behind the scenes that, that was firmed up, that he's not expected to. And they have to make a decision now. It's because they have the Saints and then they have the Bucs next week and then a bye. It's like, what do you do? Do you bring Brown back for that one game and then go into the bye, or do you take it an extra kind of cautionary step? But the word that I got is that he's not in bad shape. They're just being kind of cautious about this, given the fact that it's early in the season. But now facing a pretty critical game, and it doesn't look like Gardner-Johnson's going to be out there either. He popped up on the injury report with a foot injury yesterday, and kind of is trending towards him not playing.
Tim, when you look at this game, the Saints have been doing great work on what the Eagles have not been doing great work on. So, and Fangio talked about it, and he said it's not scheme, it's execution. I don't know. What do you see? Is he going to change some things here to stop the run? They're giving up 6 yards a pop, and he said if you don't stop the run, you're not going to get the sacks. So, how's this all shake out?
Yeah, one thing that I asked him is whether he was considering not starting Huff. The reason I asked that is because if you watch that game, you saw that Huff was struggling pretty bad when it came to the run, and Atlanta was doing the outside zones, and the defensive end's responsibility or the outside linebacker's responsibility in that circumstance is to set the edge to make sure that the run pops inside. And Huff was really struggling with that, including against tight ends. There were snaps where tight ends were pushing him and moving him off his spot well into the inside, allowing the running backs to pop it out for some big gains. And they're going against a kind of a very similar offensive concept that they saw against Atlanta in New Orleans, where there's going to be the run and the play action and the boots, and they're going to try to attack you in a very similar way. And certainly after watching the tape last week, you can bet they're going to get a healthy dose of outside zones to see if they can stop it. But, Mike, I think this is less about, scheme and more about personnel right now. You make changes, but what changes are you making? Are you putting in Nolan Smith for Huff? Is that going to be, much different? Do you have anybody at the linebacker position that you think is going to come in? Do you think Trott is going to come in and make a sizable difference versus Nakobe Dean or Zach Vaughn? They're just thin at some, they're thin at a number of spots. Defensive end is definitely one of them. Inside linebacker is definitely one of them. Safety, where they have an injury now, is definitely one of them. So it's almost like, where do you turn?
It's funny because he's a very honestly outspoken guy, and I think he was making a conscious effort not to rip in any of his players, but it seemed like almost false faith that these players they're improving, and I like what Huff did and blah blah blah. That didn't come off as Fangio-like what he was talking about the other day.
Yeah, and Jeff McClain asked him, is it possible that this group is just too young and inexperienced to play at a high level? And Fangio started off kind of saying, well, it doesn't mean just because they're young that they can't play. But as he veered through that conversation, that answer, he ended up saying, well, maybe. Maybe that's the case. So, I thought that was pretty telling. And also, the remark to me was when he was asked about Zach Vaughn and the fact that he kept getting cut blocked by Lidstrom, and Fangio's like, that's the first time he's ever faced that. That again goes back to personnel. They ended up bringing in a guy who ended up being their starting linebacker who had not really played the off-ball linebacker position in the NFL. So you're going to see things that you hadn't seen. So there's naturally going to be, a growing pains as a result of that. And when you have that at multiple spots, Bryce Huff's another one. He hasn't played the run in the NFL, and you paid him $17 million a year to be a 3-down player. Like, this is roster construction stuff. Like, this is Howie Roseman stuff, man. This defense, if it ends up being porous all year, it's still early, so we have to factor that in. But if it ends up being porous all year, the finger's going to be pointed to Howie Roseman.
Wow, this is going right up Bill's alley.
Yeah.
Bill, go ahead. He's giving you a treat.
Preacher choir, Tim. I've been saying that for 2 years now because I looked at last year's defense and felt the same way about Howie Roseman. But, look, we talked about the run defense. You talked about the pass rush. Let's talk about the passing game for the Saints a little bit because everyone knows about Chris Olave, but Rashid Shaheed is averaging over 24 yards a catch this season. If Chauncey Gardner-Johnson can't play, who's going to be the nickel corner that's going to be lined up across Rashid Shaheed?
Yeah, I talked to Quinion Mitchell this week about Shaheed, and he just said he's fast. Like, he's a total burner, and he's been making a big impact through the first 2 weeks. And so he's somebody that has made his presence felt. And then you have Olave, so they have their plate full on the back end, and they do have a little bit of a quandary. I think that if Gardner-Johnson is out, the move is to put Avonte Maddox at safety. That seems like a logical move for Vic Fangio. Then the question is, do you move Mitchell inside and put Rodgers back outside, which is a look that we saw, especially down the stretch of training camp. Like, that's something that we saw a whole lot of, or do you promote Cooper DeJean into that nickel spot? But, Fangio's actions to this point doesn't suggest that he thinks that DeJean is fully ready because he played him, it was like 6 snaps the first week, and that got reduced to 1 snap in week 2. But it feels like he still has some work to do. It's a little bit of a pickle because Mitchell has played so well on the outside, and those receivers are mostly going to be lining up on the outside, the 2 guys we just highlighted. So it's a bit of a tough spot. But if he's looking to get, how do I get my 3 best sort of proven guys out there or guys that I feel most comfortable with, I would think that would be Rodgers and Mitchell on the inside. But, we're going to see how it unfolds once come game day.
We're talking to Tim McManus. He covers the Eagles for ESPN, ESPN.com. All right, Tim, listen, there's a few wolves at the door. I have a headline in front of me. It says, Nick Sirianni has been defiant since that awful Eagles loss. If he's not careful, it could cost him his job. Now, I frankly thought it was a good call. I thought it was a progressive call. It wasn't conservative, but he is getting hammered everywhere. What is your thought process on this?
I mean, number one, this is a difficult spot, generally speaking, that Nick Sirianni is in. Because of the way that the collapse happened, because however you want to say it, whether he gave up power over the offense or it was taken from him, there's just not a whole lot of lanes for him to have control over. Game day operation is one of them, and he puts, a whole lot of work into that. I would say that the one thing that was problematic about his response when it came to those situations, not when we talked to him today, but the last time on Wednesday, when he was asked for that 4th down where he ended up kicking a field goal late in the game, like, what does the internal analytics chart say to do there? And he said, well, my chart said to go for it, to kick it. And, you can punch in any numbers and they'll give you something. So that was kind of downplaying analytics a little bit and saying, but I put I trust my process. But the Eagles put, a ton of resources into analytics. Like, this isn't just punching a number into a computer. Like, this is a wing of the operation internally. And so the problematic part for Sirianni is if he deviates from it and it doesn't go well, then that presents the possibility of friction or conflict internally. And he's already in kind of a tough spot to begin with, given the circumstances. Like, I think everybody knows that he's coaching for his job. And so if you're going against the grain in that way, then maybe that poses some further friction. But he felt convicted about what he's doing. He said that if I had to do it again, like I went back and reviewed and I feel even more convicted in it. and he's going to stick to it that way. And that can go one of two ways for him.
Yeah, that's a terrible landscape to have to coach in, though, isn't it? I mean, sometimes you got to rely on instincts. He followed the analytics early in the game, which people had a problem with when he didn't kick the field goal, and now when he made a value judgment, I mean, it's almost like the guy can't win. And I'm no fan of his, but right now I think he's in a really unfair spot.
Yeah, but Laurie has been very clear on this point when it comes to the analytics. Like when he spoke with us, it was right before their Super Bowl run in 2017, and he made it a point like, listen, we have this analytics stuff mapped out, and I expect any coach of mine to kind of follow that. And Doug Peterson did to a T. He had an analytics guy in his ear for the entirety of that year, and it was basically like, Doug, here's what you're doing, and Doug would ride with that, and he had a lot of success with that. And that's just kind of the way that they're dialed here. And so, yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Mike. Like most coaches, I feel like have that wiggle room of like, yeah, I hear the analytics and I'm going to go this way. And it's not like I'm saying that the organization is putting his feet to the fire here. But what I am saying is they've been very clear in their messaging as the way they want it to go. And so if you go away from that, then what does that mean?
Do you have any inkling that they came at him because of that decision? Not yet.
No, I don't have anything solid in reporting that I can pass along. But it's on the radar. I mean, and you're right. It's a tough situation for Sirianni. Like even in that Monday Night Football game, like I had the binoculars down on the field before the game, and like Belichick's there. And Matt Patricia's there. And it's like, what is, there's the rumors of, I mean, and they're obviously doing it just for something separate for football purposes. I'm not saying that, but it's just, we know that the way that it ended last year, we know that there was Belichick rumors. We know that once you get rid of both of your coordinators, that there's no one else to look at except for the head coach. So it is a tough spot that Sirianni is in right now. I mean, it just is. And, if they continue to lose, obviously the heat gets turned up.
Timmy, always a pleasure. I don't know. My instincts are the Eagles are going to win this game. I don't know if you feel the same way.
My instincts aren't there.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to am I overreacting to one loss, which could have very easily been a win.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to picture the defense in that environment, suddenly clicking in against a team that scored 91 points in 2 weeks. Like, can they do it? And, just right now I just can't get there. So I'm thinking New Orleans in this game.
Sounds good. Timmy Mack, always a pleasure.